Bem-vindos a todos. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Muito obrigada y muchas gracias por estarem acá. We're gonna do this charla, this presentation in English, but you guys feel free to ask any questions in Spanish or Portuguese. I'm gonna ask you guys to turn your mic off so we can hear everyone better when each person is talking. You can send your questions on the chat. The chat stays on the right side of your screen, and if you can't see it, just move around your mouse a little bit, and at the bottom, like a small bar will pop up, and there's a chat button over there. You can chat anyone during the entire presentation. Feel free to send the questions while we're doing the presentation or at the end. It doesn't matter. We're going to be collecting everything, and then we're going to talk and ask the questions that come up to either Stefan, Taylor, or Jeff. All right, so that said, I'm going to try again and share my screen. Oh, I know what happened before. I didn't share my screen before. That was not smart. So I appreciate a little bit of patience. This is my just second time doing this, so it might take me a little bit to run through things, but we're gonna get going. So we're gonna talk about waste management in remote areas, mostly in mountain areas, and we're gonna kind of zoom in with a few projects in South America, one in Argentina and one in Chile. So we invited Taylor from Do Good Shit, Stefan from Patagonia Waste Management, and Jeff from Toilet Tech to talk to us a little bit about their experience in this topic. So thank you very much and for being here with us. But before we actually get starting, I want to introduce you a little bit to Access UPNM. So Access UPNM has the mission to protect the access to climbing and hiking areas of Latin America and promote its conservation. All the way from Mexico to Patagonia, we deal with things like advocacy and public policies, conservation and stewardship, legislation, outreach and education, and also capacity building. And when we were faced, as everyone, like you guys, were faced with the coronavirus, it challenged us in many different ways, but it also presented a really cool opportunity to kind of bring the community together around themes of access and conservation, especially around climbing areas and just mountain areas in general in Latin America. So we came up with this program, and we come up with this program, Manejo, charlas y todo, demás, and this is our third presentation on it. We're going to continue this for a while now, like not only during the coronavirus, but probably we're going to keep going, probably not as much as we're doing now. But anyway, one thing I'm going to ask you guys while I'm presenting the panelists is to actually write in the chat your name, your organization, and the country you're from. So I can see that there's people from Brazil here, there's people from Peru, and I've seen people from Argentina. Where else are you from? So let us know a little bit. All right. So one thing that I want to introduce you to is our panelists. So Jeff, he dropped out of a career in mountain guiding to do his PhD on alpine waste management. He conducted extensive research and experiments on human waste, both in North America and Europe, on remote site, high elevation waste management. He founded and runs a toilet company called Toilet Tech Solution, which has implemented over 260 remote site toilets and has also been working for an engineering company, HDR, in the design, construction, and operating of municipal-sized composting and anaerobic digestion systems. All right, let's see, Taylor here. Taylor is an avid climber, trail runner, skier, traveler, and explorer dedicated to putting purpose behind her adventures. She had 3 years living in Latin America, and we were just talking about it. She traveled from Mexico all the way to Argentina and had a Fulbright scholarship. And when she returned to the United States, she founded the nonprofit Do Good Shit. And she has applied her experience in scientific research and environmental advocacy and outdoor recreation to this new project, which has a mission to improve human waste management in outdoor recreation sites and their surrounding communities around the globe. And last but not least, Stephen Gregory, we've been working together for a while now. He has been guiding in the US professionally since 2010 and has volunteered in the Patagonia Waste Management since 2015. He's a founding member of the Zion Climbing Coalition and passionate rock and alpine climber, as well as split boarder. And he's the project manager of Patagonia Waste Management. All right. Apparently Jorge has trouble hearing us, and there's, I'll just write him a little bit. All right, afterwards. So Jeff, why don't we start with you and just give us a little bit of introduction of your experience and your points of view on the topic, please.
Right, sure thing. How much time do you want me to go for right now?
How about like 5 to 7 minutes, and then we'll continue on exploring with questions.
Okay, got it. So, hey, my name's Jeff. I have a PhD in poo, and it's a lot more like it's a PhD in pee, actually. So I got motivated to essentially work for the environments that I love to recreate in, and failing out of my Alpine Guide program. I wanted to keep doing that and keep contributing. So I asked all the park operators in North America and largely what they needed in order to better manage the land that they were in charge of. And almost all of them said, we need better waste systems for human waste, because the ones that we have are offensive, really expensive, or overly intensive to manage. So I jumped right in and I started studying that, and I'm gonna see if I can do my own screen share here. And let's jump to this one. Okay, so here's just a snapshot. I'm gonna walk you through my PhD here in a couple slides. So I published a number of peer-reviewed publications on the challenges and the lack of performance of North American composting toilets, because I sampled from dozens of composting toilets throughout North America. And then I went over to Europe and studied urine diverting vermicomposting toilets in the high Swiss Alps and French Alps. I wrote a paper on that. And then we did some sort of lab-based research on pathogen destruction and other things. So, you know, these were some of the composting type toilets that we found throughout North America that were just a total joke. No compost was being made in any public composting toilet. It was far from that. It was a mixture of pee and poo and wood chips. Sometimes it was really soupy and super nasty, sloppy. The other times it was more bulked up with more sawdust, but then it was a pathogen brew chamber. None of them did anything more like composting. And studied these in all manner of conditions, from inside of climate controlled buildings to all the way up in the mountains. And what the research really showed was that source separation is critical. Much like if you want to run a waste program in a municipality, you cannot pull out recyclables and garbage. You can't do it very well at a factory. And it becomes more complex the more streams you start attempting to try and pull out. So what's important in these programs is to rely on individuals and people to do the source separating by hand. So tossing one here and tossing one there. Now, interestingly, people don't really control their orifices well enough to pee here and poo there. So what was necessary really was a system that did a good job at separating pee from poo. I looked at a few different options for seats, and the mechanical seats did a better job at separating pee from poo in a public setting. There were some really simple seats that we'll look at here, which have a separate divider. But even in this example here, you can see there's a big turd, that went on the side. And this would end up getting clogged in a very small hole that makes it a very difficult challenge for someone to maintain. So what I ended up doing, finishing my PhD, I licensed a piece of technology from France, which is, it's this conveyor belt urine diverting toilet seat, because it does a really good job. It's reliable, it's robust, it's high performance, and it's built for the public use. And it diverts greater than 99% of pee from poo. And when you have that done, now bugs can eat the human poo just like they eat animal poo. And that's the main way that animal poo in the forest goes away, is that just invertebrates come up through the soil and they eat the turd from underneath. And then pee, in the absence of all the pathogens that come along with poo, pee flows by gravity, and it can be treated by soil and the nutrients used by plants. So that was the fundamental tenet, separating North American mixed waste toilets from European separate toilets. And since then, we've installed, as Kika said, there are some 260 of these. This is the best example here is from Smith Rock State Park. And here's an example. This is what urine diverted poo looks like. It's on the left side there. It's mostly toilet paper. It's amazing how much toilet paper people will generate from a toilet. You can't even see any turds in this photo, funnily. And then once it's left to decompose with invertebrates coming up through the soil, it just turns black. But it needs some moisture because bugs don't eat dry leaves, they eat wet leaves. So needs a bit of moisture once a year or twice a year. So just to jump back here, the North American composting toilet here over 5 years of a comparison study generated 35,000 pounds of refuse waste that had to be disposed of. And the Toiletech system with the urine diverting conveyor, no bulking agent, over that 5-year period, it generated 0. I'm actually going there on the weekend. It'll be the first time in 5 years to remove the waste from the urine diverted side, and there'll be a couple garbage bags worth. So that's, I think it's critical to separate pee from poo in a public setting, and you have to do that with a really robust mechanical system that's not prone to clogging. Clogging is still, there's precipitates that fall out of urine, which require a lot of management. But if someone was setting up a really low use site with a very controlled user group, perhaps they can get away with a simpler system. But again, all of these systems need maintenance. There's no magic bullet. You can't drive your car and not change the oil or fill it up with gas. So that's all. Kika, I hand it back to you unless someone has specific questions right now.
Maybe we can wait a little bit. If people have questions, again, please use the chat, and we're gonna go back and ask them again. But now I wanna pass the floor to Taylor to talk a little bit about her experience and do good shit.
So, can you guys see that good? Yeah? Kika? We good? Let's see.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, cool. Okay, so Do Good Shit is a 501c3 nonprofit in the United States. We're based out of California, and our mission is to implement and maintain improved human waste management systems in outdoor recreation areas and in their surrounding communities, as we're all here to discuss. And we originally started this mission back in the end of 2018 when some of our founding members and our team went to Mount Everest on a film project to document the human waste that was left there on the mountain. And it was really, really shocking to see such an extreme public health and environmental health situation in such a jaw-dropping place, and a place that we truly think of as, you know, this icon of the outdoors, Mount Everest. And you know, you see the public health ramifications so clearly there, and all the negative externalities. And so as we moved on from this project, we started to see that it wasn't isolated to Everest, that it was everywhere that we recreated. We went climbing and we would, you know, run across other people's turds, the brown trouts, it's gross. And you really became aware of the situation, and we decided that we would do something about it. So we founded our organization, and kind of how we see ourselves as an organization addressing this is going through a process that I think those of you that have looked at these issues and have thought, okay, well, how could I, you know, solve a problem like this? It's just a little bit of an idea of our approach. And first, I think it's identifying the problem that you have on your hands. And the poop problem is really, really widespread, but every single environment we come across is unique. And so you always have different soils, different altitudes. Your visitor demographic is very different. Sometimes you have really conscientious and experienced outdoor recreators, and sometimes you have people that are, you know, on their first hike outside, and that's a really different demographic to tend to. You have different high seasons. You know, we work in Torres del Paine, and there's two peak seasons really one peak season in the year, and then it kind of fizzles out for the rest. So, you know, certain systems you have to maintain throughout the year, and you have wildlife to consider and weather. And so it's always a really big evaluation of what the problem is on your hand and where it's happening. And that leads you into selecting an appropriate solution. And as Jeff talked about, we believe that waste separation and urine diversion is very often the answer, if not the answer. And when we first started our organization, we started researching possible solutions, and that's how we first met Jeff and came across Toilet Tech Solutions. And we've worked with them at several sites, and it's a solution that we use a lot but are not by any means married to. You know, whenever you're evaluating a site, you have to also think about the infrastructure you're putting in, the building. We love the wilderness. We don't always love to see buildings go up in our wilderness. And so, you know, maybe there's a way to do a sophisticated WAG bag system. If your demographic is experienced climbers, can you trust them to manage that waste appropriately? So these are all things that we consider as we move into selecting what solution we'll use and permitting it with the national or, you know, the organizations involved, be it government or the parks, et cetera. And then we move into implementing the solution. So our organization offers project management, so communication and logistics between all the people involved, installation, the manpower to make it happen, and then we believe very strongly in education. So I think a lot of the times with waste management, people just don't know what they're supposed to do. They go outside and they have to go to the bathroom, obviously, but they don't necessarily know what they're supposed to do with it. And so we are integrating different methods of providing signage at sites, trainings, and providing resources to the public. And then we also do a lot of media, so photos and videos and that kind of education and exposure around what is acceptable. And then obviously follow through. We have a big fear in our organization of just putting infrastructure in and then having it not serve in the long term because either no one's maintaining it or people aren't using it properly. And so we rely heavily on the ground partners and community members that are involved to make sure that the project is going to last in the long term. And I'll give you examples of the kind of people that we partner with to make this happen, but ingrained in that has to be a maintenance plan and technical support. Just to make sure that we know somebody's going to the toilet to maintain it, or we're engaged. We can't be everywhere at once. So do we know what's going on with our different sites? And then that's able to really give a feedback loop where whatever infrastructure at whatever level we're putting in at the site is going to be a long-term solution. And so that's kind of the process that we go through when we evaluate sites. Oh, whoa. Okay, so our experience. Like I said, we started at Everest. Very quickly after that, when we founded our organization, we started looking at, other solutions. We actually did a trip in collaboration with Jeff where we went around to a bunch of toilets on the West Coast and just saw, okay, what's working, what's not working, what different sites are they in? And you can see a photo here. This is the Smith Rock toilet that Jeff shared information with you about. And that was a really starking sight to see how well that technology was working next to how horribly the technology next to it was working in the exact same building. And that's a case study that we look back to a lot. That other composting system, they're transporting out, thousands of pounds of waste a year, and the toilet tech is actually degrading well. That decomposition process is working. Here is us working in Chile on our project in Torres del Paine. Our project there is to put 3 of the toilet tech solutions technologies throughout the park. So we have one at the old Italiano camp. We're putting one at Pingo and one at Japonés. And, each of those sites presents different difficulties, but that project is still in motion. You'll see another photo here of a toilet that is up on Mount Rainier at Camp Muir. That's above 10,000 feet. And that's another one that we checked out. And it's really impressive to see the technology working at such high altitudes and at such ranging temperatures. That's a case where it's not a decomposition, it's actually a waste away, which means the waste still does have to be transported off site. And that's something that I think Jeff can probably speak to better than me. I think there were some questions about rocky, high altitude environments and if the decomposition works there. And there's a couple different ways to handle that. In this particular case, it's still flown off site with helicopters, which is something that we're not, super comfortable with. We don't love the ideas of helicopters flying waste out as far as environmental impact goes, but those are things that you have to evaluate when you're presenting solutions. And then down here is a training that we did with Jeff and the National Park Service in Zion, which is also where we met Stefan. And it's really cool to kind of see this little community of people working with poop all come together in these different ways. But that was a project where Thor and I really started, Thor's another co-founder, and we really started thinking about how to train park officials on maintaining systems and making sure that those maintenance workers were really dialed into what they needed to be doing. So our vision as an organization, here you have some projects that we're currently in different levels or different stages in. Mount Hood in Oregon, and then over here some partners. So just to give you an idea of the kind of work, where we work and who we partner with. So in Mount Hood, we're presenting to work with the Mount Hood Institute. In Lake Tahoe, which is where our organization is based out of, we're working with the Tahoe Donner Land Trust, as well as the Tahoe Climbers Coalition. And there we're looking predominantly at climbing crags. I know most of you are probably climbers, and that is an area when you look at a site where people are fairly stationary and recreating for hours at a time, which makes it a lot more possible that people are going to need to use the restroom compared to just somewhere where people are walking by on day hikes and maybe not recreating for as long. We still have our ongoing project in Torres del Paine, Chile, in collaboration with the Torres del Paine Legacy Fund. And then we're looking at the possibility of working in Ixinca Valley, Peru, and developing a program called Guides for Good there with some international and national guiding companies, including the School of International Expedition training. And then also where our project started in the Khumbu Valley in Nepal. There's a project proposal that Jeff put us in contact with there through another nonprofit, Hike for Help, and some universities that have been involved. And our organization is really open to collaborating with, climbers and organizations of all different kinds. We've already had people come to us and say, I've identified this problem and I'm really interested in collaborating with you on a personal level to try to make this happen. And that's something that we're super interested in doing. And we rely on the community and the climbers to dial us into some of those options. So that's kind of all I have for our organization, but that gives you an idea of the work we do. And yeah, I'll pass the mic over to Stefan.
All right,
Awesome.
Thanks, Taylor. Stefan.
Hey, how's it going, everybody? My name is Stefan Gregory. I'm one of the founders of Patagonia Waste Management. This is a project that was started after a personal climbing trip in 2013 to Al Shelton, and yeah, saw a need there, and began this project with Access Pan Am and a number of locals and the park there. And in 2015 through 2018, had a very active amount of the project, implementing a pilot toilet at Laguna Capri. And since then have continued working with the park on an overall management plan for the area, and are currently working through that to this day. And yeah, most of my experience is in logistics for this project and management at the very large level, like the 30,000 foot view management of the project, working with the park, working with builders, and working with the advocacy groups. So I kind of come in as the person going back and forth between everybody, and can kind of help people today fill in the gaps. If there's been any management or logistics questions, that'll be definitely where I can help out.
Awesome. Awesome. Thanks, guys. Gave us a lot of food for thought, for sure. So why don't we explore a little bit of the questions that are popping up on the chat, and some of the questions were already sent on email and we have discussed it a little bit. But Jeff, and please Taylor and Stefan, just pop in as well if you guys have some input. Let's talk a little bit of toilet paper and garbage. How do we deal with those when it kind of being left behind in the toilet? Oh, Jeff, you need to unmute yourself.
Thanks, Kika. So in Europe, at ski resorts and these toilets that I visited, this is 2012, they did not put a garbage can into the toilet building, and they preferred people toss the garbage into the toilet hole, because then they wouldn't have to go and manage an extra device, which is a garbage can. And the retention time was so long inside the waste bin. And people who are using these places, they don't have a lot of trash. They have a little wrapper here and I don't even know what else, that's the main thing. Maybe a little plastic bottle, and they'd throw those into the toilet, and they'd go into that rear waste space eventually to be disposed, because there was no dream of making compost at 4,000 meters elevation at a ski resort. It's not the point of this. The point is to provide a waste management solution that has low cost and low occupational hazard. So why not make it even lower cost and toss the garbage in too? And that was what was being done. It's an interesting perspective, because it really makes it clear what is the point of what we're trying to do. And if it's to reduce cost, and then just put it all in a centralized place and get rid of it one time every 10 years. Rather than having to come and grab garbage or do a toilet cleanup. In Zion, the Angel's Landing Trail, it gets used a million times a year. And every couple days, there's garbage piled up inside the toilet building, but not in the toilet seat, because it says don't put garbage in the seat. But there's garbage everywhere else. So the compliance here that people aren't, they're going to get rid of the garbage if they want to get rid of the garbage, especially in a variable user group. So why not get them to put it somewhere where it doesn't bother everybody else? I'm not sure that, fundamentally, I think people should pack out their own garbage, so don't put it in. In terms of toilet paper, it's not a big deal. You saw that image. Most of the waste is toilet paper after you take the pee out. That's the big volume that's left. Maybe the biggest mass too is also toilet paper. And bugs will eat that fine. If you have a waste-away system, you can also cram it in, push it down really hard. So those are my comments on it.
Stefan, in Chalten, we saw a lot of the non-compliance regarding trash in the toilet, and that was that created a challenge of maintaining the toilet itself, didn't it?
Some of it was definitely trash. The trash in there, on that case was more toilet paper with that specific system. But in general, the toilet paper isn't an issue in these systems, and the Capri unit is different than any of the conveyor belt units that are used in all of these other national parks. But garbage can be a problem, but in that unit, it was more of toilet paper and other paper products clogging a certain section of the toilet.
Taylor, did you raise your hand?
Oh, no, I think I was adjusting my glasses.
Yeah, but I was actually going to ask about your experience in Torres del Paine with user compliance and maintenance at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, I think just in general, all the sites that we've been to, it really is, like Jeff said, it's remarkable how much toilet paper people use. I mean, the accumulation is, 90% toilet paper. And I think that the system in a setting like, Smith Rock State Park, where the decomposition is going really strong, it doesn't prove to be a problem. When we maintained the waste vault, the decomposition vault in Torres del Paine of the existing system this last November, we really didn't find much trash there, which was encouraging to see. That being said, the park does have a lot of infrastructure, so there are other options for people there. But compliance is definitely an issue with, just getting people to buy in, and we've been thinking about different signage and what education techniques, how we can get through to people in that way. So we haven't seen it be a problem that is detrimental, but it's definitely something that we think about. And with these systems, another thing that I'll just touch on is, they do still have to be maintained. And we've seen sites where sometimes if a park ranger who already has a full other job has to hike in 5 to 10 miles to maintain the toilet every 2 weeks, which is the maintenance regimen that we recommend, they might not do it. And you can get to a point where those precipitates in the urine that Jeff mentioned can accumulate and clog the system, and that, you can run into issues. So they're not maintenance free, they're low maintenance and they're low risk, but they do require a certain amount of attention. And another thing that we've been considering is, okay, can we provide additional jobs in these communities and in these economies where we're training new staff members to do this work? Or can we supplement what's going on in the trainings and in the wages of the park rangers that are on site? Like, what can we do to make sure that somebody's going to those systems when they need to be maintained? And that's just an ongoing dialogue that we have in our organization and in our project sites, and that's where those community partners come in. In the case of Torres del Paine, we have the Torres del Paine Legacy Fund that we're very closely working with, and they're really good about checking in with us. Building rapport with park rangers is huge. I'm in WhatsApp communication with probably 10 different park rangers, and we just check in. Hey, how's it going? They send videos when something's being weird, or hey, what does this look like? And that kind of rapport and technical support is something that is essential for the maintenance and the compliance piece. But yeah.
Oh, I am unmuted. Oh, thanks. What about urine? I know you guys have touched a little bit about your views on how to deal with urine on each of your talks, and Jeff has been chatting a little bit, but maybe just bring it out a little bit of how worried should we be with urine?
Jeff, take it away.
Urine. So you can drink your own urine. Okay, so it kind of goes back to one of my slides here. Let me just pull it up, see if I still have it open. All right, zoomed in. Okay, so what is urine? Urine is made up mostly of water and then urea. which is nitrogen and carbon bound together, and doesn't have any heavy metals. Generally doesn't have any heavy metals. There are no pathogens unless you're terribly sick. And urine self-sanitizes if you store it. So urine can pick up pathogens off a poo source, like the conveyor belt is a source of poo. But if you store it for weeks or months, depending on what level of treatment you need, it can self-sanitize, and it flows by gravity. So what are the concerns in it? If you put it on the surface of the ground, let's say you don't have a toilet and you have people peeing randomly, like Mount Whitney tried this for a while. They said, no more toilets. They took the toilets away. There's a good story there. And then people started just peeing on the side of the trail and in the campground, and it smelled really bad. So now, if you put it all in one place and you have really sensitive plants, you can damage the plants because there's too much nutrient. So design of a drain field and the selection of the site is important. And if you don't have any soil at all, then you have to be somewhat concerned about the pathogen load. Pathogens are reasonably well taken out by soil. So then you might need to bring in a quasi-soil field or some sort of drum that holds media into which the urine goes for filtering. Or you just have to store it in a tank to kill the pathogens. And then, generally you don't want nutrients going into water that you're going to drink. But the argument here, which is the direction the national park has taken most of their high elevation sites, is that if you put a toilet in and the toilet urine goes straight into the groundwater, that this is no different than having all of these people pee into the rocks and have all of their pee go into the groundwater. So it's no better, but it's certainly no worse than that. And by providing a toilet which collects the poo, you get the vast majority of the pathogens out in the poo. And you get those into a bag and you remove those. So you can get hung up on any one of these things to make a project infeasible. And it's important to take a step back and look at what exactly are we concerned about here in the setting, and what would it be like if we didn't have a toilet?
All right. I guess it kind of brings to me, like, into my mind a little bit of what we do usually with Leave No Trace, like poop far away from water sources and pee wherever. It kind of goes along with that idea, but try not to concentrate and do it like on the base of the routes or next to your campsite or next to the trail, just because of the smell and what it can attract to. I don't know if I'm totally off, or it kind of goes like on the same line of thought.
Yeah, I mean, those are good principles to follow for an individual managing their own pee and poo. I think when you end up centralizing it, there ends up being more scrutiny and more questions. And so I think it's important perspective to have. Usually a toilet's not going to bring more people, right? So it's just a toilet that's better managing the site that's there. Now that might not be entirely true, but largely it's not going to have an influence on visitation if there's a nice toilet, 10 miles back there.
Yeah,
so,
we get that feedback a lot and always laugh, like somehow people are going to go see this great new tourist attraction of the toilet that is now on the trail. It's like, well, if you go to the outdoors to take a nice poop, then yeah, we gotcha. But continue, Jeff. I always think that's a funny commentary.
Yeah, so just important to be comparing here. What's the implication of urine if we don't have a toilet? People are going to still pee. They're not going to hold it until they get back home.
That is true. Let's explore a little bit of a different point of view of having to to manage waste in the backcountry, which is actually bringing the building supplies and materials that we need to create the building structure. So Stefan, what were the solutions you guys had for building that huge structure you had on the backcountry, and what did you do to put them over there?
Yeah, I think in doing any construction and planning a backcountry build of any type is keeping it really simple and keeping it modular. So being able to construct in the front country and then Lego piece it together. And in our case, doing a pilot toilet there, we did a design that required it to be a little larger, depending on your area and type of solution you're trying to implement, keeping it pretty tight and working with the land manager to see what types of materials you can use on site. So keeping weight down. For us, it was largely 6 to 8 people, and then 3 to 4 carries of about 12 to 15 from the national park, carrying everything by hand to the site.
That's a lot. I remember
It was a lot of
weight. The roof. What's that?
Yeah, yeah, we can't say thank you enough to the Los Glaciares Parques Nacional crew, Zona Norte, for all the help with that and all the support for the project throughout the entire time. It's been a huge effort, and thousands of feet and hours were put in constructing that. But yeah, if you can construct them in the front country and then assemble them in the back country, and that park in particular, in Chaltén, Los Glaciares, has constructed smaller units, and that's exactly what they've been doing, and they're quite light, and they've implemented, I want to say, at least 8, possibly more now. So they're crushing it down there.
Taylor, what about you? Like, what's your experience in these building structures?
Yeah. We've had some funny conversations around this. For the Torres del Paine project, we utilized the prefabricated wishbone buildings that Jeff sources, and they have some definitely big pieces and they can be heavy, but they're this awesome recycled lumber, and so we wanted to give it a try. In the case of that project, some of the materials were human portered, some of them were animal portered, and some of them were helicoptered in. In the future, I think that we would opt to, yeah, here's an example of that. In the future, I think we would try to use more locally sourced materials, but portering is always an issue, and it's always a matter of, calling volunteers for volunteer help with human portering and logistics around getting animal porting and if it's allowed. And yeah, Jeff, I don't know if you have any notes from your installations, but. I think if you're talking, you're muted, Jeff.
Yeah, right, thanks. Buildings, yeah, I mean, we started off without buildings, just a toilet seat. What's critical is the separating pee from poo. One quick. Thanks. So this is just me managing my children. Okay, so you just need this urine diverting seat. People have put it over top of nothing. It sits in Rocky Mountain National Park with a couple wood slats on the side, and a doghouse in the back on top of the ground. They whipped it together with a fence that they destroyed like the week before, and they carried it up in a single go. So you can do it right on the surface of the earth. You don't need anything heavy duty, but as soon as you want it to last longer and be less maintenance, you want to create some waste volume storage capacity, usually inside the ground. If it's freezing cold in the winter, then you get, the freezing cold only enters the first couple inches of the soil. So you get better decomposition year round if you can put it in the soil. But as soon as you go in the soil, you need an anchor, you need a foundation. It kind of can escalate to the point where you're putting up a whole structure and it has a roof in the backcountry. So, it's like, why? Because people need to have their underpants dry if it's raining when they pull their pants down, and the underpants don't get wet. I don't know. There's like a bunch of decisions that have to be made. And it's a spectrum from really keep it absolutely simple to put it all inside of a building. And so then once you're in the buildings, as Stefan and the group down in Las Glaciers went, they wanted to do something that was made out of some materials that could be found locally. So it ends up just being really heavy. It's a one-off solution, and lots of portering, lots of custom work. It's beautiful, and it can really get people invested into it, as it did their whole crew, their whole team, and the locals. But it's difficult to replicate and difficult to scale, which these problems we're talking about are not one-off problems. They're societal-wide problems. So that's why I went the direction of a pre-manufactured structure that was built and proven in Canada to work over top of a vault toilet hole or a pit toilet, just mixed waste in the ground. And I customized it, just to talk about it and why I went this direction, and where it works and where it doesn't work. I think I forgot to press the share screen button. So it's, we wanted something that didn't have, that was easy enough to carry, maybe by people or by animals, and certainly in a single helicopter load, which a bunch of these have been set up by helicopter. You can get the whole thing, weighs about 1,000 pounds in a helicopter. Lots of helicopters at moderate elevations can carry 1,500 pounds. So as part of the design criteria, it's recycled plastic boards, come from recycled plastic in North America, because there's a lot of junk that gets recycled. All these pieces, then they've been portered in and they've been moved in by animals, right? Down in Chile. Taylor, didn't they carry it in with horses?
Yeah,
So there's still some big pieces in here, which I'm sure were really difficult and awkward. And there's still some refining to be had. And maybe there's a sweet spot somewhere between totally custom one-off and this, North American product that had to go in a shipping container and got lost in Punta Arenas for a while.
For a couple different projects, we started trying to partner with some architects. Like in our examination of the Tahoe area, there's a local architect that put together like this little A-frame with almost like a cage for granite rock that you already find somewhere like Donner Summit, the climbing crag up there. It's basically something that could be really easily taken to site and then constructed on site, kind of utilizing the rocks there. And Jeff, do you have a photo of the Long's Peak toilet? Because that was a cool one too.
Sure.
But yeah, just and having something in that case where the entire Tahoe Basin could rely on this simple thing. So it's not a one-off solution. It's this whole geographical area, but you're still doing something that's aesthetically pleasing and that is going to allow the locals to buy in. And I saw somebody commented like climbers are usually hesitant to talk about poop, and everyone's hesitant to talk about poop. It's that out of sight, out of mind thing. We're used to being able to do our business and flush the toilet and never think about it again. But I think if you can make it something, our organization, our branding, do good shit, all this, the media we do, paired with, more beautiful installations that attract attention, like maybe we can break that barrier. So you're kind of balancing the act of, can we have really aesthetically pleasing toilet buildings like this one that Jeff's showing now that blend into the environment and are attractive, and then also fairly easy to install and naturally sourced and generate a conversation that hasn't been generated in our outdoor community before. So I think trying to balance those two things is what we're after. I think that toilet won an architectural award, didn't it, Jeff?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It might be good, something good to copy for South America. It obviously needs a bunch of the project management infrastructure that maybe we'll get around to talking to here, but it's not something that a business up in the United States can really support. It's these end up being so customized. It's great if you guys can come up with this design, but without, and just ship the bare minimum that needs to go from one place to another place.
We're also currently looking at a much larger scale implementation throughout Chile. And we're working with an organization there called Polivante. And they've done a lot of kind of larger scale government contracts before and some architectural designs, et cetera. And it's that kind of idea is maybe, okay, maybe they're the on the ground organization that's doing that kind of unique project management that Jeff's talking about. And they're also bringing in these designs where, you know, all of the systems could have that same look. So it's a little bit plug and chug, but then could also be customizable. And yeah, this is
that project you were just talking about.
Yeah, so they did this one up in Pan do Azucar, and we're looking at having different variations of this per region throughout Chile that would blend in and be environmentally and culturally relevant to the place that they're installed. And this particular installation we weren't involved in, but that's a fog capture to be able to have a hand washing basin, which is a cool addition to some of the infrastructure.
And then for me to chime in really quick before we depart from the topic is being a project manager, I absolutely love the efficiency of not having to construct a structure and do one-offs for sure. The unique problem with Argentina is that the import tariff is so high. At the time, it was cost prohibitive. Now, maybe not the case, and like some kind of middle solution of shipping just the key parts to bring the cost of construction down would be fantastic. Or coming up with a design to be able to implement in the country. And maybe this isn't Argentina specific, but anywhere with high import tariffs sometimes make that difficult.
In one of the cases in Chile, we actually only sent the frame of the wishbone unit
Okay.
down, and then decided to use locally sourced lumber and or corrugated roofing to actually put the walls of the structure in place.
Perfect.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, importing fees are a big challenge, but let's not go into that. We're actually in our final 10 minutes, and we got a question on email before about how to manage waste on high altitude, and the recommendation for an area that is full of rocky surface and low temperatures and the high frequency of visitors. And with that question, what I wanted to ask you guys is that, and I think Taylor already addressed that in one of her slides from Do Good Shit, but just some things that go into your mind when you're considering what type of waste management solution is appropriate for a specific area.
I was spacing out. Sorry, was that question for me? I was reading comments.
So just on that high altitude situation and
yeah, but not just the high altitude. Just use that as a base for us to address like all the aspects and criteria, or some things that we need to consider when thinking about the appropriate solutions for a specific area.
Mm-hmm.
And that is one of the areas that we could think of.
Well, okay. So my website, I've spent years building this website, and most of it myself by hand. And every time it goes through a new iteration, I'm trying to get it to address better and better what the fundamental criteria are to go from a problem to a solution. And so if you go to the website that I have, this can walk people through afterwards. You know, not everyone's going to do it at the same time. Maybe GoDaddy will crash or something. But so your first decision needs to be generally, are we going to try and decompose the waste, or are we going to just contain it in a little vessel? And there's a huge variety of factors that influence which way you go. And actually, I've done videos. Taylor and Tor recorded a pile of videos where I explain this. So we could just, send everyone there for these little videos. But in general, if there's soil, you can decompose the poo. Unless there's so much poo and so many people and so many toilets, and like Angel's Landing has 1 million visitors a year. This is actually where Stefan lives. And this trail just gets so used. It's incredible. There's a lineup 10 people deep every day of the year from like 8 in the morning until 8 at night, waiting to use these 4 toilets. There is some soil up there, but the usage is so absurd that you're not going to keep up with the decomposing it. So in that case, put it in a container, get it out. If there's no soil, put it in a container and get it out. There's no magical solution for making the poo and toilet paper go away. If you give people a toilet, they're going to fill it up. So yet if there's some soil and there's some trees, then that means there's bugs in the soil and they're going to eat the poo. So that's the first step. You go decompose, you go waste away. And then within that, you end up choosing how much investment in maintenance are you going to put into the urine management system, and how that ties in with how much soil is there and what the maintenance program is and how tight are the regulations. How much do you need to do to show treatment to the urine? And that comes in making sure that you validate. Hey guys. You got to make sure you validate these people are going up there and they're peeing anyway. So tie that in. And to get into the details beyond there, we have to do drawings and calculations and stuff. That's my input.
Taylor, Stefan?
Yeah, I mean, Jeff kind of did a pretty good overview of what we do when we evaluate sites. I mean, a big part of it is, like Jeff mentioned earlier as well, imagining what the site's going to be like without a toilet, and the visitation volume. I think that's phase 1 of how many people are going and what kind of demographic is going. And like I said, what can you trust that demographic to do? And kind of when is the threshold met where you actually need to put a full toilet system on site, or can we maintain it as more of a wilderness area? And so that's kind of our biggest preliminary evaluation before we move into all those considerations that Jeff just mentioned. Obviously, he's evaluating for one specific technology, and in our case, we evaluate for several. We're not just thinking about the toilet tech solution and if the urine is going to go, how that system works. That's one of the things that we consider, but there's also other solutions that we're looking at. And I think something that's really cool in our field right now is that there's a lot of research and development happening in waste management. And a lot of that's thanks to the Gates Foundation. They've poured billions and billions of dollars into human waste management and research and development. And so, we're also waiting to see what's the next technology going to be. Is it going to become less cost prohibitive? Can it be less expensive? What are the different tactics we can use? And so staying open to all of that, as well as what we have currently, and as sites change and management changes. I will note that probably the biggest roadblock that we've run into as an organization is permitting. And, we've worked on a lot of different lands. We've worked with state parks, national parks, Bureau of Land Management land, railroad, private, and there's always those permitting and technicality bureaucracy issues. And that's right now the biggest hurdle that we kind of keep hitting. And Jeff's been a huge help because he's obviously experienced in it, but finding ways of how can you present what you're doing to show that the urine is treated in the way that this old legislature that's probably not even relevant anymore is asking you for. And in the case of the Chile project, we're having to find ways to have hand washing basins, which is why the fog capture was involved in those images. Because a certain amount of water has to go into the toilet system in order for it to be legal. And so just playing with all of those regulations as well when you're evaluating a site is a big part of it.
Yeah, it seems like to put that all together is that each area is very specific. You're going to need to use information from the environment you're working with, the type of user group in that specific area, and the government organization or land manager doing it. And there are some big solutions for certain areas, but it's going to be so focused to the area you're in. So doing your homework on the front end and then knowing where you're working and who you're working with will then filter you towards what solution is going to actually work for your area. And it was perfect what you said, is being nimble and being able to pivot with new technology and changing as the process changes.
All right, everyone. I'd like to thank you all again for participating. Stefan, Taylor, and Jeff, it has been a pleasure, and we've learned a lot. Every time I hear you guys talk about this, I think about the complexity that goes along waste management and like issues that are like that have environmental, social, cultural, red tape aspects and partnerships and everything that we need to think of. And that's why like I asked you using that question that Alondra has sent, because there's no recipe. Even though we do have a few technologies that we can try to fit in, we also need to understand the context, and that's a huge part of it. So again, muchísimas gracias, muito obrigada. Thank you very much for participating. I have everyone email over here, and we're going to send you a few more information and materials on emails soon. Thank you and have a great day. Stay safe.
Thank you.
Adios.